I decided on plan B. What's plan B? Nimrod. It's a very interesting thing. You have to remember, the Chumash was written by God. Period. The Eibishter wrote the Torah. And you got to figure everything written in the Torah is kind of important. If it wouldn't be important, it wouldn't be in the book. Nimrod got 3 whole Pesukim. Nimrod has 3 whole Pesukim. Besides for the fact that he's mentioned later as Amrafel, a whole bunch of stuff. Nimrod has 3 whole Pesukim all to himself. All to himself. Which is fascinating. Who's this guy Nimrod? Who is this guy Nimrod? Now we know Nimrod from the story of Avraham Avinu. But it's next week. Pashas Lech Lecha. That's much later. In Pashas Noach, you have 3 Pesukim on Nimrod. I'll give you a little bit of the context, okay? I love to talk about this because it's one of my favorite subjects. When you look in Pashas Noach, Pashas Noach is a very long Pasha. It's very long. I think it's 149 Pesukim. It's a big Pasha. Not that Bereshis is small, but Noach is pretty long. And so the beginning of the Pasha, everybody knows, right? Noach is a nice guy. And Hashem doesn't give him children until he's 500 years old, so they should be minors, so they shouldn't be held liable for their sin. You know what a minor is in those days. As long as you're under 100, you're good. Can you imagine growing by mitzvah at the age of 100? Not bad. Huh? You guys are, but infancy, you still be in nursery. I'm in 2nd grade. If 100 years old is bar mitzvah, and today bar mitzvah is 7th grade, so I guess I'm in 4th grade. Noach's children are not born till he's 500. So when the Mabul comes, there's only 3 of them, and the oldest one is only 100. They didn't have a chance to do any Avedis. They make it into the Teva by the hair of their chinny chin chin, as the expression goes. So the whole part is about the Mabul. Noach builds the Teva, and Hashem tells them they prepare food, and Even Ezra describes how many rooms they were, the right side, the left side, the front, the back, a whole. The Even Ezra goes into details how they built the Teva, which you don't have in Rashi. And they stay, the Mabul's a year. It's a solar year. It's 365 days exactly from the 17th day of the month of Cheshvan until 27th day of the month of Cheshvan the year after. It's 365 days. And of course you know that it says in Sfarim that L'shim Sham Mazolos, there are people who hold that when you count 5,784 years from creation, the year the Mabul is not included. Because the sun didn't move. The stars didn't move. The sky, the universe stopped. The universe stopped. There was no rotation. Now you guys, if you've lent it to secular subjects, they taught you about how the earth circles the sun, and the sun is one star in the Milky Way, and all those other things. We hold that the earth is the center of the universe. It's standing perfectly still. No rotation, no axis, it has a tilt, but that's a relative thing. And the universe is rotating around the earth. And it stopped for a year. So when the Mabul was over, a solar year later, 365 days later, the sun was exactly in the same spot it was when the Mabul started. So if you're counting time based on the cycles of the sun and the moon, there was no cycle. And if there was no cycle, in the measure of time, time didn't pass. There are opinions who hold that the year of the Mabul doesn't count. It didn't happen in terms of our calendar.
So how was the year? The same amount of time.
Oh, the clock. A biological clock. Noach's scars from the lions was a year.
Was it always day, always night?
There was no day and no night. It was dark. There was no day and no night. They had a star, they had a stone. I just saw in the Even Ezra that he went to the Chidekel and he found a stone that has a magical property that produces natural light. And that's how they lived. That's the beginning of the story. Everybody knows. They come out of the Teva and the world is destroyed. And Noach's reaction is to bring a carbon, which was a risk. Because bringing a carbon was then murder. Because you were not allowed to kill animals and eat meat. But Noach knew, because Noach studied Torah, that there was going to be a time in the future that people would be allowed to eat meat and that you'd actually bring karbonis. And Noach on his own, all by his lonesome, he decided that the fact that the Eibush had told him to take more kosher than non-kosher animals was for the purpose of bringing karbonis. And he did it on his own. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't ask the Eibush permission, 1 second. And the Eibush responds unbelievably favorably. And one of the most important events in all of history happens. Hashem swears. This is a wonderful oath, guys. This is what we live on. The oath of Parshas Noach is very important. Hashem swears, you're stuck with me, and I'm stuck with you. There's never going to be another God, and I'm never creating new people. It's a very important part of the story. Hashem says, whatever people are, this is what I got. Nothing more, nothing less. So Hashem is stuck with us. When Rosh Hashanah comes and we wonder why we deserve, now you're supposed to say the mandatory blah, blah, blah. The answer is Hashem is stuck with us, just like we're stuck with Him. That happened after the Mabul. Wait, but that's the end of the story. Then Noach makes the wonderful mistake of trying ink and hole. Right, gets shikir. You have the story with Noach and the rest. And then you have genealogy. Right, the boring parts of the Chumash. The only reason we like the boring parts of the Chumash, why do we like the boring parts of the Chumash? Because there's very few Rashis. It's very few Rashis, just names, no Rashis. So you have the whole family of Yefes, the whole family of Chum, and the whole family of Shem. Or maybe you have family of Shem, and then you have Chum, and then you have Yefes. What's interesting is people just assume that it's names of people. But it's understood from the Mefarshim that there are exactly 70 names. I say this every year, I just love to say it. If you will open up Parshas Noach and you'll count the children of Noach, you'll come up with exactly 70 names. And those 70 names are actually the 70 nations. The individual names of men mentioned in that Pasha are not people. They're fathers of nations.
Does the Mefarshim say this or is it a coincidence?
No, Mefarshim say this. Aryeh Kaplan in his Chumash tries to figure out, using the Targum Shivin, the Septuagint, Targum Shivin says what they mean in Greek. He identifies each one of those 70 men in Greek. Now, Greek is a language which people still know, and he tries to identify who the Shivim Umes are and where they existed in the ancient world. So this is a very interesting Pasha, which we fly over because it's boring and there's no Rashi. But if you understand anything about history, ancient history, and you understand even a little bit about geography, this piece of Parshas Noach is incredibly important because it's acknowledging the Shivim Umes, the 70 nations. Now, Yidden are not on that list. We're considered the 71st nation. Then you have Doi HaFlaga, the story with the Tower of Babel, which happened in the year 2000. In other words, 292 years, 244 years, I think, after the Mabul. And Avraham Avinu was very much alive. Avraham Avinu was alive by the day of Flood. He was 52 in the year 2000 when they made the Tower of Babel, and the Eibishter gave them different races and different languages, and they spread them all over the world. It happened during Avraham's lifetime. And then the end of the Pasha is the 10 generations, again, boring names, from Shem until Avraham. That's how Parshas Noach ends, okay? So everybody knows the beginning of the Pasha. The end of the Pasha, we forgot what it's about because there's not a lot going on. You have the story of the rainbow, you have the story of Noach's drunkenness, you have the story of the Tower of Babel, and then you just a bunch of names of people. And it finishes with Avraham Avinu. But if we're right that the genealogy listed, Shem and Chum and Yefes as children that are listed are not 70 people, but 70 nations. And that's what the Chazal say, some of the Mefarshim say. That means that this Parsha is really giving us a window into the future history of mankind. The whole history of mankind, in very brief, is represented in Parshas Noach. Right? I don't know how many nations there are officially in the United Nations, but it's over 200. Al Pi Ted is only 70. If you go around, there are only 70 angels. So there's a couple of nations up there that are fighting over an angel. They have to share it between them. Okay, does America have his own Malach? Maybe America has one Malach till the Mississippi, one Malach from the Mississippi. I don't know. But there's only 70 Malachim. And there's 70 names mentioned in the Chumash. And plop in the middle of that, this guy Nimrod gets 3 Pesukim, one man. Who in heaven's name is he? Who is Nimrod? Who's this guy? Now the Even Ezra says the weirdest thing. And the Ramban, of course, beats him up. I'm starting with the Even Ezra and not with Rashi because it's so interesting. The Even Ezra, I'm going to read the Pesukim to you, okay? V'chush yolad es Nimrod. Chush begatted, however you're supposed to say that in English correctly, Nimrod. Who heichel, he began lihiyez gibeir ba'aretz, to be a strong man, a warrior on the earth. Meaning, the first Giber, whatever you translate Giber as, is this guy Nimrod. Hu haya Giber tzayid. He was strong in the area of tzayid. Tzayid means hunting. Tzayid can also mean deception and trickery. Lifnei Hashem, in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Al Kain, because he's the father, he's the first Giber, the first mighty warrior, he's the first tzayid. It says as a statement, as a rhetoric, as a fact, Ki Nimrod Giber tzayid lifnei Hashem. Like Nimrod, a warrior of tzayid, whether tzayid means hunting, or tzayid means deception, or tzayid means a combination, before God. So Nimrod becomes a prototype, right? We have a situation in Eretz Yisrael, and we are not allowed. We're afraid. We're not abashed to say that these are Nazis. So the word Nazi becomes a prototype. It becomes a representation of an idea. A person who delights in killing people for no purpose other than killing them and making them suffer. Correct? Nimrod is a prototype. From the time Nimrod lived till the end of time. If you meet a human being who's a giber and a tzayid, he's a tough guy, he's strong, and he's a tzayid, which means either he's a hunter or he's a deceiver or both, you'll call him Nimrod. So Nimrod stops being the name of a person and becomes the name of a type of person. A person who's defined by giber and tzayid. And then it says, V'atehi reishis mamlach, the beginning of his kingdom is Bavel, and Erech, and Achad, and Chalne, which are all in Shinar. Shinar is in Bavel. And then it says in the fourth pasuk, Mina Arata Yasa Asher. And Asher went away from where this guy, Asher saw this guy Nimrod, it was up to he left. Even es Ninveh, Vesachai Vesir, Ves Kolach. And Asher moved away. Now according to Rashi, Ashur was the generation before. Asher was older than Nimrod. And Asher's children started to follow Nimrod. Asher got really upset and he said, I'm getting out of here. Asher left his children and moved someplace else because he didn't want to watch what this guy Nimrod was doing to the world. Okay, this is Chumash. So I made a mistake. I have to say, I told you, Nimrod got 3 Pesukim, got 4 Pesukim all to his lonesome. Who is Nimrod? So the Even Ezra offers the weirdest pshat of all. The Even Ezra says that Nimrod had a way of attracting animals. He had a way of attracting, and he attracted animals, and he shechted them, and he made them karbonos. Yes, the Even Ezra makes Nimrod into a big tzaddik. Hu heichel, he began lihiyos giber tzayid, a warrior of capturing ba'aretz. The Even Ezra holds, and Even Ezra's own words are, listen to his own words. Zuhi derech pshat, that's the simple pshat. V'adrash derech acheres, but the madrashim are going to disagree with me light and day. But the Even Ezra said, if you take the words and translate them literally, pshat, Nimrod was a guy who had a way of attracting living animals, shechting them, I don't know what kind of kosher was necessary, and bringing karbonis. This is what the Even Ezra says. And Nimrod was a cool guy because he figured out how to draw animals to himself when they were alive. Now somebody mentioned correctly, this is brought in the number of the Mefarshim, including in the Zohar. There's a little bit of Zohar. Nimrod got about 6-8 lines of Zohar all to himself. That when Adam left Gan Eden, the Eibishter gave him a special outfit which protected him from animals and made animals be subservient to him. Noach took that outfit into the Teva. Chum stole it from Noach, and Nimrod stole it from Chum, and that's how Nimrod was able to draw, following the Even Ezra's approach, was able to draw living animals to himself, which he was able to shacht and kill and bring karbonis. And then Esav took it from him. So the Ramban gets very nervous, and the Ramban says, V'hinehu matzdik rosh. The Even Ezra is making a rosh into a tzaddik, and excuse me, sir, I don't agree. But the Even Ezra says himself, I am translating the words literally. I know they're going to argue with me, all the fancy rabbis, but I'm telling you, that's the translation of the words. They translate the words, Bapashtas, Nimrod had a way of attracting animals, which he brought karbonis. Now, there's a variety of other interpretations, obviously. He's the only guy who makes him into tzaddik. Everybody else makes him into Rasha. One of them is, it says in Medrash that Nimrod was the first person to kill animals and eat meat. Which is interesting. Why? Because we learned in Bereshis, we learned last week, that human beings were allowed to eat the same things that animals were allowed to eat, which is Zroim Upedis, seeds and fruits. They're not allowed to eat meat. Before the Mabul, killing animals was the same thing as killing a person. It's not even too different of the only shish mitzvahs b'nei Noach before Noach, because killing a person and killing an animal was the same avera. Tzar Balachayim, Adam only got 6 of the lavim. Noach got the 7th Tzar Balachayim. When you were allowed to kill animals, torturing animals became prohibited. But by Adam Rishon, killing an animal and killing a human being was the same malacha, same one of the sheish mitzvahs b'nei Adam, if you will. You were not allowed to kill and eat meat. Hashem allowed Noach to kill and eat meat, but the Chazal, the Mefarshim say on this Medrash, Hashem allowed people to kill and eat meat, but they refused to do it. They chose not to. Some Mefarshim say if they found a cadaver, if they found an animal that was already dead, they would eat the meat. And Nimrod was the first person to actually hunt and kill live animals. He was the first hunter. That's what some of the Midrashim say. He was the first guy to think about fighting a living animal, chasing it down, killing it, and eating its meat. And he's called Giber Tzayid for that simple reason that he was the first hunter. That's a more simple pshat in the Medrash. The Ramban says something really upsetting. And I have a class on this also on my website. I gave a class a couple of years ago. I remember when I gave the class. The Ramban says that Nimrod was the first man to make war. He was the first man to make war, which is very hard to explain historically. But there are Mefarshim who say that Ramban says that Nimrod was the first man to make war, the first person to mobilize people into organized killing. I don't know if you guys appreciate what war means. War means taking the biggest aveda in the world and making it a politique, making it a policy of a government that's supposed to protect people. War is man's worst invention by far. Nothing compares to war. Stupidity is not the best. War is also not the best. War is man's single worst invention. Nimrod was the inventor. So people kill a person, but you get a bunch of people to kill a bunch of people in an organized way. And they train and they practice and they have tactics. Nimrod was the inventor of war. It's one of the insights into what makes Nimrod this guy that's called the Giber Tzayid. Another opinion, which is close to that, but not mamish that, but very interesting, is he was the first person who asserted himself to be a king. Meaning, people came out of the Mabul and they lived. Now, how do people live? How do people live? Any of you go to history? Ever study history? Learn about ancient history and the different stages of evolution of humankind? Yes. The story of humanity is the story of transitioning from every person providing himself with all of his needs into communities where we share responsibilities. One guy makes all the clothing for the people. One guy makes all the shoes for all the people. One guy makes all the bread for all the people. One guy teaches all the people knowledge. One guy organizes militia, safety, right? This is called living as a community. To live as a community, a couple of things have to happen. Number one, you have to stop killing each other. Yeah? Number two, you have to have enough provisions to have stability. At a time that people did not know how to farm, they were constantly on the move. Because they would eat up the right? If you're constantly on the move, you can't build a community. The first communities were built along river basins, valleys, river valleys, where there was a raised supply of water. After people figured out plowing, irrigation, harvesting, dealing with parasites, this took time. Like Noach is credited with being the father of agriculture. Noach was the father, last week's Rashi, Noach was the father of farming. I don't have to move from a place to a place. I can use the same land year after year after year. I have to use it sustainably, can't overuse it, I can't exhaust it, I can't destroy it. And this allowed people to gather in larger and larger communities, and because people have many, many needs. We're not like animals. And we need each other. One guy makes shoes for the whole community, and so on and so forth. This was part of the development of society, of civilization. But the idea that one guy comes along and says, I'm better than you, and I'm the king, and you're going to pay me tribute, and I'm stronger than you, and you're weaker than me. Nimrod was the first person to have this fantasy of controlling others. Power. Meaning to say, he didn't invent kingship because there was a necessity. In other words, people needed a leader to protect them from an enemy. He invented kingship because he was drawn to power. He wanted to control people. And he had whatever tactics and skill it took to manipulate others. He was able to intimidate people. People were afraid of him. He was a powerful guy. And Nimrod was able to finagle that people would follow his lead. And after Nimrod established a kingdom over a group of people, he expanded. He was never happy. More people, more people. He wanted to control as many people as possible for no reason other than he had this need to control people. So Nimrod is the father of power. Power is one of the most powerful drives that exist amongst human beings, and it's really, really evil. Power is corruption, and the more power you have, the more you corrupt you are. Nimrod was a power monger. He wanted power. He wanted to control other people, and he successfully finagled to control people using one or all of the methods prescribed. Number one, Nimrod had control over animals because of his special outfit. And when people saw the power he has over animals, they said, this guy's a half a god. If he can control animals, maybe we should be submissive to him. Or, Nimrod was the father of war. Whatever technique Nimrod employed, Nimrod successfully was able to control large groups of people and create the phenomena of a king. It was his fantasy, it was his desire to control other people. It's another interpretation of Giber Tzayed. So we have a few different insights into Nimrod, right? Number one, that he was able to draw animals to bring karbanos, which is the nice guy, yeah. Number two, he was the father of war. Number three, he was the power, of control. There's a variety of different insights. What about Rashi? What does Rasha say? Rashi has no mercy on Nimrod. Rashi really goes straight for the jugular on Nimrod. Rashi says as follows. He translates the words Lies Giber Lahamrit Kol Ha'olam Al HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'atzaz Deir Aflaga. Nimrod had it in for God. That's what Rashi says.
Well, what does that mean in English?
Nimrod had it in for God. He rebelled against the Hashem. He was an apokaitis. He was a murdered b'malchus. Meaning, it wasn't just war, it wasn't just power, it wasn't just animals, it wasn't just hunting. He was after the Eibishter. He was, let's call him for lack of words, it's hard to call a guy that lived that long ago an atheist. He was certainly a pagan. He was a pal. He didn't believe that God has any control. God's very great, but he's up in the heavens. Down here on earth, I'm God, the parallel God in heaven. Right here, I got all the power in the world. And he rallied people to stop being afraid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That was his thing. He's called Nimrod because Giber Tzayed Lifnei Hashem, he was a great warrior. And now you have to translate the word Tzayed not as a hunter, but as a deceiver and as a manipulator. He deceived and manipulating people and being not afraid of the Eibush. Now, Chavre, you have to think about the context. What's the context? A couple of hundred years before there was a flood. And God showed his hand pretty good, huh? God showed his hand pretty good. He didn't?
But no one saw the flood.
They heard, it was certainly historic. They certainly heard about it.
Yeah,
Right, and by the way, Noach was alive and Shem was alive. The people who went through the flood were still alive. It's only a couple hundred years after. And everybody knew that the Eibishter was angry and destroyed the world. And Nimrod said, we're not afraid of him. Now, if you want to be really coy, want to be really Giber Tzayed, let's say this. This is called politics. Nimrod knew that the Eibishter swore that he's not going to destroy people again. He said, hey, I can do what I want. God's stuck with us, right? So whatever his logic was, Nimrod is called Giber Tzayed. He was great at deception, at tricking people. He rallied humankind away from the fear that they had of the Eibishter. You know, it's like Amalek, right? Why do we hate Amalek so much? Why do we hate Amalek so much? The answer to the question is because Amalek was the first. When Amalek attacked the Jewish people, they got pummeled, they got bludgeoned, they got bloodied. But the mystique, the ephemeral fear that the world had of Yidden after Yetzias Mitzrayim was taken away. And we never forgive Amalek for it. Nimrod did that to the Eibishter. After the Mabel, people were afraid. Now they knew the Eibishter's not bringing another Mabel, but they knew he's a pretty tough guy, this Eibishter. Yeah, he can do whatever he wants. He destroyed not only all humankind, all land creatures, except for 8 human beings and a couple of animals living in a box. He's a pretty powerful Eibishter, and when he wants to exert himself, he exerts himself. There was a sense of, you got to be careful. Listen, don't be so religious, don't be a big tzaddik, but you have to be careful not to mess with the Eibishter, because you mess with the Eibishter and he messes with you, you're going to lose. And Nimrod said, nah, it's overblown. Don't worry about it. It's good. He's not doing it again. We can do whatever we want. Nimrod rallied the people. Giber Tzayid. He was a warrior of deception, of misleading, of tricking people. Like it says by Esav, Ki Tzayid Befiv. Esav tricked Yitzchak. Nimrod tricked his generation into not being afraid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to make Avodah, to make the idea that God is powerful in heaven and we're powerful on earth. And we really don't got to worry about him too much, right? And what does the next pasuk say? Hu haya giber tzayid lifnei Hashem. He was a warrior of tzayid, which we're now translating as deception in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Al ken yomar ken Nimrod giber tzayid lifnei Havaya. Says Rashi, tzod daiton shalbrias bepiv. He captured the minds of people with his words. Umaton limred b'makam, and he redirects them. He makes them make a mistake to rebel against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And on the words Lifnei Hashem, says Rashi, mischavin lahaknitai al panav. He got in the Eibishter's face. He had a kavona to be chutzpahdik to the Eibishter. And then the next Rashi says, Al Kain Yeyomer, historically, when you want to describe an apokaitis, right? Before we described Nimrod as a troublemaker, we described Nimrod as a great warrior, we described Nimrod as a man of war or a man of power. Now we're describing Nimrod as a man of Avodah. Any time in the history of the world you want to describe a person who has the chutzpah to take on God personally, we call him a moirid, mem reish yud. Nimrod giber tzayid lifnei Hashem. Any person who comes along and dares the Eibishter to punch him in the nose, we call him Nimrod. Because Marshia ba'azus panim. Nimrod got people to sin with chutzpah, and the famous words that we all know about Amalek are brought in Rasha here in our Parsha. Yoideya riboinoi umischavein limrod bei. Nimrod knew who exactly the Eibishter was, and he pfeifed on the Eibishter. He had him in bud. Nimrod made a joke out of God. Now, if the Eibishter wanted, he could have answered him. And apparently he didn't want. So Nimrod got away with it. And Nimrod, therefore, developed some clout. People say, yeah, look, he's not afraid of the Eibishter. The Eibishter can't do anything about it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Gemara. That the Gemara says there was a guy named Titus. Titus was Onkelos' uncle. Titus destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. And Titus was really he was very much in Nimrod's image. He was an atheist. He didn't just hate Jews and kill Jews. He pfeifed on God. He took a dagger and he stabbed the pareiches and it started to bleed. And he came out of the Beis HaMikdash with the bloody dagger and said, look, I killed your God. When he was going back to Rome, out of the Mediterranean, there was a storm and his ship was floating off course. So he looks up to the sky and says, listen here, God, okay, at sea you're stronger than me. Fight me on land. Fight me on land. So the sea quieted. The sea quieted, shashtil. As soon as he got off the ship, a tiny insect went up his nose and ate out his brain. And the Gemara started getting headaches. So we hired people to stand and bang. And then when he banged, the mosquito was quiet, but that only lasted for 30 days. After 30 days, they came in the dash, even though they were making all kinds of noises, mosquitoes eating out his brain. The Gemara says that he paid a goy double wages that he paid a Yid to bang, because the Yid, he knew the Yid wasn't getting pleasure from his headaches, so he paid him half wages. When he died, they opened up his skull and a bird came out, a massive creature, an insect, a little tiny bug, ate out his brain. As they shit in the Gemara. So Titus was in Nimrod's image. Nimrod's the prototype. Nimrod was the guy who said to the Eibishter, I'm not afraid of you, I dare you. I'm not afraid of you, I dare you. Historically, I don't know why I need to say this, but I have Mishigasan. Napoleon was that kind of guy. Napoleon was one of the smartest men who ever lived. Napoleon was so intelligent. He probably had an IQ that was so high that he couldn't test it. Napoleon was a real atheist. It's a high madriga, an atheist. The Alter Rebbe was afraid of Napoleon for a reason. The Alter Rebbe was afraid of Napoleon for a reason. He was so smart. And Napoleon made fun of the Eibishter like you make fun of a dead rat. But he had to sort of get the French people to come along. Had he succeeded, he would have mamish made the world in type of course. When he made himself emperor in the Notre Dame, he put his crown on his own head. That's all you got to know. That was the kind of guy Napoleon was. These are people, the image of Nimrod. But Nimrod is the prototype. Nimrod is the numero uno. Nimrod set the stage for people to have the chutzpah, fight from the Nebishah, just to absolute a mockery out of God. And sometimes the Eibishter lets. And sometimes the Eibishter lets, and they get away with it. And that's why, by the way, for the record, it says in the Gemara that our Shemona Esrei had 18 brachas. And at the time of the destruction of the brachas written by the Anshket Sagdoil, the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash. At the time of destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, you had all of these people who were really, they were not religious. They made a joke out of the Eibishter. They were real atheists. And the Chachamim added the bracha of Alam Shinim. It's the 19th bracha of Alam Shinim, speaks about Nimrod. The people who are so smart that they can actually argue apocryphsis, they can argue heresy effectively, and it's very hard to fight with them, and sometimes the Eibishter lets them win. And we daven to the Eibishter, V'lam Shinim al Tehi Tikva. They should lose. And Nimrod is the father of that whole Geschichte. Nimrod is the father of that whole Geschichte. Now, I have to finish the class. I just want to finish off with the Zohar. The Zohar repeats, some of the Mepharshim say that he had this special outfit that Adam Rishon had, that Noach had, that Chum stole, that he stole from Chum, that he used to attract animals to himself. And he used that as a means of drawing people to himself. And then he managed to convince people, don't be afraid of the Eibishter. You can do whatever you want, and you can get away with it. The Eibishter can't stop you. That was Nimrod's M.O. So, Chavah, I want you to think about this. Hashem gives Nimrod 4 Pesukim. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 Pesukim. Hashem gives Nimrod 4 Pesukim. That's how important and evil he is. But it's interesting. In one of those 4 Pesukim, a man named Ashur, who's older than Nimrod, says, I can't deal with this guy, I'm moving. And I think it's part of the story. Ashur picks himself up and goes away. He sees what Nimrod is up to. He cannot take him on. He can't. But if I cannot take on Nimrod, I'm not going to say he's right. I'm not going to succumb to his bullying. I'm not going to succumb to his warring. I'm not going to succumb to his heresy. And he leaves. It's a part of the story of Nimrod, according to Rashi, is Ashur's departure. So what's the message? The message, Rabbi Yisai, is that when the Eibishter created the world, and he created the Torah, and he created Mashiach, and he created Avraham Avinu, how do we say it politically correct? He really made it fair. He made some really bad people. Bad people in terms of war, bad people in terms of power, and bad people in terms of heresy. That's what we got. The first warrior, the first king, the first power monger, and the first real atheist after the Mabul. And the Torah says, I want you to know, Zelu Mazeh Asalakim. There's Tumah and there's Klipa in the world. And the biggest tzaddikim had counterparts. There's a word from the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe said, this is a quote, I'll say it only in English because the clock is late. The Alter Rebbe said, when the Rebbe, the musician Maggid Neshama, had to come into the world, the Klipa said INF. You know what INF stands for? It's not fair. You're giving Kedusha too much of an advantage. So the Alter Rebbe said, so the Eibishter gave the Klipa a guy named Wilhelm. And Wilhelm, I'm assuming this is Frederick the Great. Wilhelm was a generic name for the kings in Germany. And then the Alter Rebbe said, quote, when Itztid is done Napoleon, now there's Napoleon. When I'm afraid I'm going to have actual Mesiras Nefesh. What the Alter Rebbe said, Maila Umazeh is Napoleon. Napoleon was a real tumah. The Alter Rebbe was afraid of Napoleon. And the Alter Rebbe gave his life. Alter Rebbe passed away 8 years before his time. The Rebbe Marash had a son who passed away at the age of 8. Tzemach Tzedek said this was the neshama of the Alter Rebbe, who came to live the last 8 years of the Alter Rebbe's life, because the Alter Rebbe gave up 8 years of his life that Napoleon should be defeated. And it's a lesson in Pashas Noach. There's tumah and there's klipa in the world. Now what happens if you meet such a tumah and a klipa? Sometimes it's stronger than you. Sometimes it's so convincing. You say, maybe he's right. Maybe he's right. Maybe he's right. When someone says something stupid, you show them that they're wrong. Or you don't care what they say. What if he's convincing? Huh? What if he's going to make good points? Salient points. It all makes so much sense. Maybe he's right. Maybe Taita is wrong. So at the very least, you do what Asher does. You say to this guy, you're smarter than me, you're stronger than me, you're meaner than me, you're more powerful than me. But Hashem's Torah is true whether I can defend it or I can't defend it. So you say, yeah, okay, let's argue. You say, no, I'm going away. Sometimes you meet a tumah, you meet a klipa, Torah is true, that even if you cannot defend the Torah, you walk away from the tumah. You walk away from the tumah, you want nothing to do with it. Just finish my father's Agazuz told me a story. My father got married in 1962. He was still a bocher when this happened. So the Greenwich Village then, it was not what Greenwich Village is today, but it was still the craziest place in the world. And my father knew a man who had a from Shpacha, not Lubavitch, and their daughter got caught up in the hippies. This is the beginning, the early 60s. And she was involved with the drugs and all the shtus involved. My father was a Russian-born boy, but he spoke a good English. He was a good debater. He's still a good debater. And he came to my father and says, I want you to go to Greenwich Village, find my daughter, schlep her out. My father said to me, I really didn't want to go. I didn't want to go. So I went into the Rebbe. And I asked the Rebbe, do I have to go? I told the Rebbe I don't want to do it. And the Rebbe said I didn't have to. It's one of the lessons of Pashas Noach. Torah is true even if you can't defend it. And sometimes you meet a tumah, you walk away. You do what Asher did. And in the end you'll see that Nimrod and all the Nimrods are defeated, and Hitler and all the Hitlers are defeated, and Napoleon, all the Napoleons are defeated. You know what makes Mashiach different? Mashiach has no enemy. The reason Mashiach works is because against Yechidah there's no klipa. Mashiach has no le'umazeh. Everybody else has an enemy, even other Medishim. Mashiach has no le'umazeh. That's why Mashiach wins, because nobody can fight with him. Let's start Mida of Kinderach.